Welcome everyone to What's Your Story. I'm your host Emmanuel Mutui. Today I have an amazing guest. We met about 2 years ago, and since the day I met him, I knew I had to get him on this show. And it's been cancellations after cancellations, but we're finally here, and I'm really excited to have him on the show. So welcome, Shawn.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you.
It's an honor.
I'm the one who's honored for you to be here. And so we'll just do like what we do. We'll just go to the beginning and start with your story. Yeah. So where are you from?
Originally from Portland, Oregon.
Okay.
I was born out there in 1980, so 44 years ago.
Wow.
And it continues to be where most of my family is, and so I get out there occasionally to visit, but largely, you know, my home is Colorado Springs, and hopefully will be for quite some time.
Because you were 12, you said, when you moved here.
I was, yeah. We moved around quite a bit growing up. My mom and dad were divorced when I was just a few months old. And she had moved out of the state of Oregon, and then by the time she was 21, had 2 more boys, and so I have 2 younger brothers. We're all 3 years apart, and throughout my childhood, we moved around quite a bit. My mom was in radio. She was a single mom, and so oftentimes looking for a job and, you know, going to where the work was. And so, you know, she was absolutely an incredible mother in the things that I think that she probably needed to overcome to raise 3 boys for a long time. So when
you moved here, you moved with your brothers and your mom, obviously. What was life like?
You know, we'd moved so many times that you know, I was expecting to not be here very long. And I think going to school and starting school, I'd already kind of been wired to anticipate that. And so really forging relationships that I felt might be long-term was rather difficult, because everything up to that point was very temporary. And so just moving throughout the city, you know, again, my mom was in radio, which is pretty exciting, so we got access to a lot of cool things. Spent a lot of Sundays watching football in DJ booths, and it might be why I ended up in college my freshman year as a radio DJ. So,
oh, what?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So I couldn't get myself away from that, but you know, I just went to work, went to school, you know, did the best I could to stay focused. I was I think I was smart, but I was oftentimes in trouble as well. And so, you know, I wasn't a bad kid. But what I'd learned, I think, is I had a little too much influence and would always instigate things that probably teachers didn't like very much. So. But I spent a lot of time in what they call back then, in-school suspension. But I happened to have straight A's. And so I don't know if there was something to just locking me in a room, making me do work or what. But yeah.
You're a growing boy with a lot of energy.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I went to Helen Keller, Russell Middle School, West Middle School. And then started over at Coronado High School my freshman year, and quickly moved again and transferred to Mitchell High School. Mitchell High School was probably the first time I felt like I had a tribe, like I had relationships that meant something to me. It was the first time I had, you know, had friends that I felt cared for me as well, and you know, genuinely had the best interests, my best interests in mind as well as mine theirs, and that meant a lot. I think that set me up for seeing this community, and Colorado Springs is my home and my future.
And so after you settling in Mitchell High School, could you tell me the dynamic between you and your brothers?
Yeah, you know, growing up, because we moved around a lot, we were really close. We did everything together. I was the oldest, and so naturally would take on a lot of responsibility in caring for them, for better or worse. You know, as a big brother, my mom was working a lot. And so as we got older and went into high school, we kind of started finding our own paths, and you know, and really those relationships weren't as tight at that point, but it was still something that, regardless of what was needed or what, you know, was going on, my brothers and I stayed pretty close.
To this day.
Took care of each other.
That is So when you were that young, though, you said your mom is in radio, you finally got a home, you're becoming a man. What do you want to do at that point in your mind? That's
interesting you ask that. I mean, you know, coming from, you know, single mom family, you know, low income family, not ever feeling that, though, by the way. My mom did an amazing job of making it feel like we had the world at our fingertips.
That is so cool.
But you asked an interesting question, because I reflect on that quite a bit as I look at what I've accomplished and where I am today. I don't know that I had a lot of dreams or aspirations that I can remember back to at that point in high school. I think it was more of, you know,
It's got to make it.
It's got to make it.
Yeah.
What does that look like? You know, college wasn't particularly something that I was driven for. It wasn't something that was
Really?
I was being pushed towards.
Interesting.
And so even, you know, the opportunity to go to school was huge for my family. Neither of my parents, you know, graduated. And the reality is I only went for one reason. It's because my mom had decided she needed to move back to Oregon. Her dad needed care, and she wanted to provide that care. She asked if I wanted to move too, and to my point earlier, I'd established some really good relationships that I still hold today, that are my closest friends, and decided to stay. And so she left. I had no job, no home. Did some couch surfing, and I decided, you know, to find a place to live, I would apply for college.
Oh, yeah?
And applied to one school because that's where my friends went, and ended up at Adams State College down in Alamosa, Colorado.
So did your brothers move with her?
They did.
So all alone?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How was that, like the first couple months after she's gone? Like, what is your mind frame?
Scared a little bit. You know, the uncertainty obviously is something that, you know, people deal with in different ways. I think as I reflect on my life and things that have helped me accomplish what I have, you know, making the best of my circumstances has been something that has been pretty consistent throughout my life. You know, I don't regret, and I look at the circumstances I'm in, and I've always just been able to make the best of those. And so while the uncertainty and fear was there of being all alone, you know, generally if you graduate, you leave. I mean, my daughter's 21. She knows she can come back home anytime she wants.
Not you.
When you don't have that, you know, it's much different. But I appreciated that. I think it, you know, there's some resiliency that you learn.
Oh, totally.
I just had to figure it out. And even to this day, it's a phrase that I use quite a bit, which is, "We'll figure it out." Even if my wife, you know, loves it or not, sometimes, you know, she's like, "Okay, I trust you." So, but you know, in general, I think, you know, you approach these situations and, you know, you can plan all you want. You can try and anticipate, you know, the future all you want. But sometime, at some point, you just got to say, "We'll figure it out." You know, and again, make the best of those circumstances and forge forward.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So you go to Adams State, and because you don't know what you want to do, so what did you major in?
I was doing, when I was at Adams State, I was in business administration, so a fairly generic degree. Everyone asked if I was a teacher because it was a teaching college. And so I was taking business classes there. I'm going to be honest, I wasn't, you know, the most engaged, best student. I had a lot of friends, enjoyed myself. Alamosa was really cold. You walk out of your, you know, your dorm room and there's a dust storm and you just turn right back around and go right back into the dorm room. And so after 2 years at Adams State, I moved back to Colorado Springs. So I dropped out of Adams State and decided to come back here and try to find my way in this community, and enrolled at Pikes Peak Community College at the time, doing a variety of things.
So how did you get into the banking industry?
Yeah, it's a fun story.
Because
it was by accident. It was by accident.
Okay.
So, and if you talk to most bankers, they'll tell you, like, well, this is what I didn't want to do when I grew up, but you know, the banking grabs a hold of you and it sucks you in, and so I was, you know, I moved back to Colorado Springs. I was about 20 years old, 21, and I was working for Carnival Cruise Lines, doing really well. They had a location here, and you know, I was 21 years old, getting free cruises, making pretty decent money. And
what else can you ask for?
I mean, I'd never traveled beyond the mountains in the back of our family wagon.
Oh my God!
You know, here I am at 2021 getting cruises, you know, in the Caribbean. So it opened up a lot of opened up the world to me at that point.
Oh, totally.
And so, you know, through that time, I had reconnected with a girl I'd met down in Alamosa, who would later become my wife, and And we found out when I was 22, we were going to have a baby. And, you know, for me, I reflect on that moment, and the decision was very easy for me. I wanted nothing more than to be a dad, and to be a good dad. The first words I ever said to my daughter was, "You'll never know a day without me." And I think some of that, you know, just in general, is how, you know, the principles and just how much my mom invested in me and the work I saw her go through, but also I didn't grow up with my dad. And so I always knew that if, you know, that was going to happen, that, you know, I knew what I wanted to do. And I honestly, I talk to my daughter even today, and I tell her often that she quite literally probably saved my life.
Wow.
And she gave me direction, and so through that process, you know, at the time I was also in paramedicine school, so I wanted to be a paramedic.
Oh, whoa.
So I was doing my, you know, emergency room stuff. I was doing all the things, long hours, and when I found out I was going to be a dad, I kind of took a step back and asked myself some, you know, similar to the question you're asking me, is what do I want to do? What do I want to be? What do I want to provide for my family? And I realized the weight and the work of paramedicine and what you see every day, death, injury, pain, you know, seemed easy at 22. But as I projected to 20 years, I don't know that I think I realized it wasn't what I wanted to carry into my home every day. And so I started applying for jobs. And I was like, well, let's see what's out there. I'll go work somewhere, you know, full time. I dropped out of school. My wife at the time was in school, so I wanted her to be home and do that while I was providing. And interviewed with Federal Credit Union. And, you know, did well in the interview. It wasn't the banking that attracted me. It was just the hours and the stability of that role. And I got a call from the hiring manager. So I had, you know, Alamosa. So this is probably a good lesson. So I filled out the application, and everyone asked these questions, right? Like, have you been convicted of all of these things? And in general, the answer is no. But it's the first time I'd had to answer that question, you know. And I got in some trouble in Alamosa. Nothing major, nothing hurt anybody, anything like that. But I was honest. I was like, the reality is, I would have never known if I hadn't put it on there. And little did I know, that call from the hiring manager, her name is Lisa, she asked me about it. And she said, you know, is this behind you? And I said, absolutely. We talked through it. And she's like, well, I really appreciate your honesty. And she's like, I want to give you a shot. And I was like, wow, you know, okay, awesome. And so that was how I got into banking.
By being honest.
By being honest. I share that story, you know, because there's, you know, 2 to 3 people in my career that if it weren't for them, I wouldn't be where I was. And that was the first moment. And, you know, that was the first kind of investment somebody had made in me that, you know, was completely out of the blue. Like, she didn't have to do that.
You didn't even know her, like, at all.
No, you know, and
wow, that is so awesome.
I kind of laughed, like, wow, maybe I shouldn't have answered that. You know, I questioned that question, but you know, the reality is, I learned a really valuable lesson in honesty at that moment. And not only that, I think I learned a lot about, you know, people. And to this day, you know, I pay that forward. You know, for opportunities to. You know, give someone a chance that otherwise may not have it. And I look for things in people that most may not. And it served me really well over the years in how I build teams and how I invest in people and the relationships that I have. So,
that is so, wow.
So yeah, that's how I got into banking. And, and it was supposed to be temporary, by the way. I was, you know, at that time, when I started there, I was still in school. The baby was coming. I was promoted 4 times in a year.
Oh my goodness.
I was working at the executive level on mergers and acquisitions and department incentive plans for sales. Wow. At this point, I'm 23. So it just came easy to you. It just came easy to me.
That is, wow.
You know, and I give this lesson, I speak to a lot of organizations, you know, that you know, are trying to get folks into banking. And, you know, one of the things I tell them is, you know, that all started because I raised my hand. There was a committee or a project that, you know, the supervisor in the department needed done, and they couldn't find anyone to do it, and I had no idea what I was doing, but I said, I'll do it. one thing led to another, and that's what put me at the, in the boardroom with the executives talking about how do we incentivize and keep a healthy culture through a merger and acquisition for a pretty large company at the time too. So
wow.
And so a lot of things started clicking, and at that point in time, I said, well, I'm going to stick to this banking thing and see what happens. And so dropped out of school, and right around that time, my daughter was born, and I brought her home on my 23rd birthday. So
wow. So you just, what is the phrase? Took it like with a duck, like where. Well, do you know what is that phrase?
With a duck, I don't know.
Like where you jump in it.
And just dove right in.
I'm from Kenya, y'all, so these American phrases. But
watch, we'll probably think about it in 10 minutes.
I know, right? So, yeah.
So I jumped right in, and I again make the best of your circumstances.
Yeah, yeah.
At the time, again, my sole purpose of taking that job was to provide for my family.
Yeah, but in it, you found something that you enjoyed.
And in it, I found something that I enjoyed, and it was the greatest gift, I think, that I was given.
Wow.
Because I found a place, I found a purpose, I found somewhere I can add value.
Yeah.
More importantly, I was learning.
Yeah.
And I was intentionally listening to the folks around me who had accomplished what I had hoped to. And trying to take in all I could at the time, because again, remember, I dropped out of college.
Yeah.
And the goal was to go back. After a couple of years when my daughter was a little older, and through my success at INT, I didn't go back to college.
Yeah, you didn't have to.
I didn't have to. I decided to stick with the banking and just worked my way up over the years. So
let's go a different route here. You mentioned that you didn't grow up with your dad, and then when you're all of a sudden you're a parent and you're alone, your family's not here. So how did you learn how to become a good father?
Very instinctual.
Yeah.
People try to plan for it, read books, which, is great. It's good advice, have some good advice in those. But it just came naturally.
Yeah.
There was nothing I wanted more than to provide a life for my daughter that maybe I hadn't experienced, right? And I love, how I grew up, rural country all the time, and it was an adventure. But there was more that I knew I wanted to give. And for me, even at a young age, legacy mattered. There was a cycle that we have generationally in families, and for me, investing in myself meant that I would be able to invest more in my family and my daughter, and that's what drove me from the banking standpoint to do more. And over time, you learn lessons in what to do, what not to do as a father.
Yeah.
I often tell my daughter now, she just turned 21, and it's pretty crazy because now we're sitting down having a drink talking about these things, and she has lots of questions as well, but at the end of the day, it's like, we grew up together.
Yeah,
and
that's a good way to look at it.
It's a really unique situation to have a child at such a young age, and it's created a lot of passion for me to seek those folks out and to share my experience as well, and for young fathers, because it would have been easy for me to walk away from that. Society would give me a free pass to do that.
Oh yeah, totally.
And it was never an option.
Yeah.
It just absolutely wasn't. And I do get asked, how do you just make that decision? And I wish I could tell you, because it's something that I would love to, to be able to articulate and share with others, in hopes that, more and more men make that decision to be a father. And I say that, because being a father doesn't mean you stay together all the time, right? Being a father you can whether you're with the mother, whether you're not, you have a responsibility and a duty to be a father and to be in that kid's life, and it matters quite a bit, and I knew that.
Yeah.
And
so just being there.
Girl. So just being there.
Yeah.
Theory is just love a kid, hug a kid, kiss a kid. Tell them when hey, don't do that, it's going to hurt you.
Yeah.
And then just back off and let them make their own decisions.
Right.
And just be there to catch them. And so I didn't have you know, a lot of lessons in being a father. I didn't, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't read any books about it either. It just kind of hits, and your heart changes, and there's nothing else in the world that matters but that little young baby. So,
that is awesome.
yeah.
So let's go back into the banking world.
Yeah.
So at 23, your first couple of years, you already achieved a lot of success. How do I ask this? What was your drive? I know you want to take care of your family, but did you have goals that by 25, I want to be this, by this age, I want to accomplish this? Or were you just kind of taking the opportunity that was opening up?
Around that time, I was taking the opportunity.
Okay.
But it was leading to more, right?
Yeah.
And so after a few years at Federal Credit Union, and I was in their operations center, so I wasn't customer facing. But I learned and realized I was really good at building relationships.
Okay.
And it was just being attentive and listening to people, understanding how they're motivated. And for me, what I had learned, and this is through mentorship of folks around me in the banking industry, was, you know, to really grow in the industry, get into the customer-facing side, sales, the sales environment. And, you know, I'd already done really good in sales, you know, my previous positions. And so stepping out of the kind of the operations center within the four walls of the bank and into the community was a huge change for me, or a huge shift and the right decision. And so I went to JP Morgan Chase.
Okay.
And I was hired for a position during their merger and acquisition. So I've had a whole lot of experience in mergers and acquisitions. And the role that I had taken on, I loved it. But I'd travel quite a bit around the region, supporting different locations. But when JP Morgan Chase had acquired Bank One, they eliminated my role. And this is where the second person who is absolutely instrumental in my career came about, because when that position was eliminated, I'd had numerous offers from branches to take a position as, you know, a teller or customer service. But something didn't really excite me about those roles.
Yeah.
And so I went to the district manager at the time. His name is Wayne. He knows this story as well, because when I see him, I tell him how much I appreciate it. And, you know, I said, look, I want to be a banker. You know, at this point, I'm 25. Okay. No real experience being a personal banker in a retail branch. But I knew that's what I wanted to do. And so I was pretty relentless, and he had made a decision to give me a chance. And so he said, I'm going to create a position for you.
What?
It's a banker training, so I'm going to give you 6 months to report to me and to do all the training you need to get licensed through investments, all of the banking certifications I would need as a banker. And then I got to travel around the country with different training programs with Chase during that period of time.
What?
And then at one point, and then finally a position opened up in one of the branch locations here in the city, and he put me in it. And so through that process, I mean, still again young, just driving. Yeah. You know, I know that I love my work. I think I was somewhere in the top 15% of bankers in the country at that time with Chase, and was doing really well. And so I have to cap that story off with Wayne, because the best part about all of this is he eventually later was recruited and left Chase to go to Ent. And he was going to build out their commercial bank division. And as he was leaving, we had a conversation, and I thanked him, obviously. You know, I was very grateful, and to this day still am. And he looked at me and smiled, and he's like, I didn't think you could do it. And I looked at him, because nobody ever told me that before. Yeah. And he smiled, and after a small awkward pause, he's like, but you proved me wrong. Wow. And I'll never forget the interaction. There was a lot of validation in it, and I think that it really cemented my passion and in general just my confidence in myself to do this work. And so again, so that was number two. Wow. And if it weren't for him making that decision, creating a position that didn't exist specifically for this kid that refused to back down from what he wanted to do, you know, who knows what that next step might have been. And so very grateful to Wayne. He's still here in the community as well, retired from banking. Yeah. We'll occasionally catch him over at Red Leg, and we'll have a beer and chat about the stories. So.
Yeah, that is so cool. So after that, you stayed obviously at Chase. How long were you at Chase?
About 5 years. So,
Okay.
So here's the third person. I had a client at Chase. Her name is Aileen. In fact, I just saw her last week, and we talked about this story. Amazing woman, amazing banking leader, recently retired as well. She was a client of mine, and at the time was the market president for Vectra Bank here in Colorado Springs. And after about a couple of years of doing her banking for her, she's like, we should go to lunch. And I was like, all right. I'd never been invited to a lunch by a bank president before. And the purpose of the lunch was, so she could talk to me about recruiting me over to Vectra Bank. I laugh because I tell her this all the time. It was my first business lunch. I was nervous. I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know what to order. She ordered a tuna salad with raw tuna. I'd never had raw tuna in my life, but I didn't know what to do, so I ordered the same thing. I was like, I'll take the same thing. So they drop these plates in front of us, and there's like, literally raw tuna sitting on top of my salad. And again, this is that's not food that I got to eat growing up, And so it's a beautiful tuna fillet, and it was delicious. And so, I enjoyed it. It's just funny those little details that matter, and her and I giggle about that quite a bit. But on the back end of that lunch, she ended up hiring me as the business banker for the Pikes Peak region.
Wow.
And I'll admit, full transparency, that was probably 5 years ahead of when I probably was qualified for that job. As we talked last week and we reminisced about this a little bit, she again said, she's like, I just saw something in you that told me that you were the right person for the role. And once again, owned it. Loved the job, and it put me right in face to face with what I knew my passion was growing in, which was business. Every interaction I'd had with a business owner previous to that at the bank with Chase, I'd learned something. And I really gravitate toward situations and arenas where I'm absorbing knowledge. I can ask questions, and the opportunity to find my way in a field, in a position where it was entirely focused on small and commercial business banking.
Wow.
Was pretty exciting for me.
Yeah. And the whole Pikes Peak region.
So I covered the region. We had like 3 or 4 branches at the time. I think I was 27 or 8, somewhere in there, probably 27.
Are you kidding me?
No, that's why I said I was probably had a few more years to go before I was ready.
Dude.
Before I was on paper ready for that role.
Right.
Wow. Again, what are your circumstances? What's the playing field? And identifying what it takes. What are the conditions for success? And at the time I didn't recognize how I was thinking through these things. And in reflection, at my age now, I figure those things out and I pinpoint it. And, and in hopes that I can transfer that, to my kids and next generations.
That is impressive.
Yeah.
But this drive that you have, where do you think it comes from?
That's a really good question. It's there's not a. I'm not driven. One of the hardest parts about the banking side, actually I can answer this question. One of the hardest parts about folks that have kind of managed me in the past through the banking is that I was never driven or motivated the same way as many of my peers, meaning, the money wasn't the driver. So in sales, obviously there's incentives, and oftentimes, that's what you're working for. I couldn't tell you my incentive plan for the last 20 years because coming out of something like paramedicine where I realized my passion was helping people, and then coming into the banking world, I hadn't quite figured out how I was going to fill that passion. And through my work in banking, and largely through, small business, loans, starting small businesses, I had an epiphany that I am helping people. I'm just not stitching them up, all of the things that you would think of helping people from the medical standpoint. I was just helping them in a different way. And, sitting down, in my late 20s, closing on an SBA loan to start a company with the folks in tears. They had a bottle of champagne, which was the first time someone had brought in a bottle of champagne to me in a bank conference room. But where it really came together was the jobs. Not only did I help them start this business, but I had created, in that instance, 15 jobs in that moment. And for me, for whatever reason, that's what I latched onto. And so throughout my career in banking, what drives me are a few things. My impact on the community. How do I pay it forward? I've accomplished what I have because there have been a few key people in my life that saw something and invested in me. And I want to continue to pay that forward. And then the third one simply being, returning back to my community what they gave to me, which was a home. And I think that was the right questions, but and so so I think what I learned there is that's where that drive started to develop. That's the motivation of I'm helping people. I mean, once that clicked, I mean, I was hooked. I mean, this is my world. I can make a difference in my community. I started tracking how many jobs I created, which I know today the economics of all of those things and how it has a ripple effect throughout the community. And then just the idea of service, which really was planted when I got to Vector Bank. And was given the opportunity to, take a step into the community side of things and really invest my time in areas that I was passionate about. And having that platform, in meaning banking, to do that, I realized very early on what not only was an opportunity, but for me it was a responsibility. I think as a banker in a community, we have a duty to give and to support community development, right? And I think it was easy for me because a lot of the areas I serve and where I invest a lot of time are low-income families, and because it was my background. It was easy for me to connect with a single mom or somebody who came from a single mother household with low income or some sort of struggle. It was not hard for me to make those connections and identify with folks. And so to this day, I continue to be sure that there's a certain level of my time and capacity that's donated to that work.
Wow, that's awesome. So I want to fast forward to recently. Well, I think it probably was about 6-7 years ago. You've been in the banking world all this time, and then you decided to go into in the political arena. What was that motivation? Because that's like
So this was it was not a part of my plan. I think this is where, if you're paying attention to what's happening around you, you sometimes realize that not everything's your choice. And what I'd realized is the work that I'd done in the community over the years, what I had invested in, some of the organizations that I'd kind of at that point in time, been, whether it was a board, whether it was the president of the board or chair of boards, had positioned me really well in the community from a network standpoint. So I had a very broad network of people that I'd worked with. I had just completed a leadership program through Leadership Pikes Peak. There's a component of that program where you're largely focused on the community access piece. So you learn human services, fire, police, all of the things. So I had a very deep understanding of how a community operates. And during that program, randomly, ironically, it had come up, you should run for the school board. And I was like, no, politics aren't for me. I'm not doing that. So a few months later, a couple of D11 board members had resigned. And I was just flooded. I mean, I got calls from folks within the district that I'd worked on in different capacities, calls from the community. I think I'd even had a call from a city council member at the time, which at that age, I mean, you're like, well, that's exciting. And, in no way did I feel like I was qualified or would have that opportunity or chance to do it. And so, but again, responding to the community calling you to action, I think there's an importance to that when you see that. It happens for a reason. And it would be easy for me, again, to say no. But I have, a very strong commitment to serving this community, and so I applied.
Why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
And so I went through the process, numerous interviews. One of the more interesting experiences I've ever had, because there were about, I think, 12, 13 different people that had applied for those 2 seats. And they were appointed by the remaining board members. And so I went through the process, and I'll never forget, because the meeting where they had made the announcement and decision on who they were going to appoint, I was in California, and I was with my daughters. I had my daughters on a little daddy-daughter vacation, and was in Hollywood when I got the call during the board meeting. It was happening, and so we were leaving Hollywood, got the kids in the car. I stood outside to take the call, and it was an interesting moment because I didn't maybe realize how much I wanted it until that moment.
Interesting.
And when my friend said, "You're on," there was just this. I bent over, like I just
wow.
Everything just was like, whew, what just happened?
Wow.
And that was a moment that probably will forever, it changed the course of my life a little bit.
Yeah.
And before I knew it, the next day, here's the funny part of this, I love this too. Next day, I was walking, I got a call from the superintendent of D11. He's like, he wanted to congratulate me. And I was literally walking into Disneyland, as he was congratulating me. He asked the question, he's like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm going to Disneyland. And so it was my Super Bowl moment without winning a Super Bowl trophy. Like, congratulations, you're on the Board of Education. I'm going to Disneyland.
Right.
And, got back and had my swearing in opportunity, swearing into office, and which I'd used that opportunity to invite this beautiful young woman that I was very interested in, and is a government nerd, to swear me into office. And we weren't dating at the time, but I was like, man, I think that I'm going to ask her to swear me into office. This might be get a date out of this. And
way to plan ahead.
Yeah, absolutely, and it worked. She's my wife now. And so, but I was sworn into office. It was August 2016, I think. And then about a year later, had made the decision to run for re-election because I was appointee. I had to run for my seat for the 4-year term. And so I embarked on my very first political campaign and election process, and ended up winning.
Wow. Okay.
And which was a really cool experience. And it's you're very vulnerable in these campaigns. You're answering a lot of questions. I think I was, at that point, I was 36 years old, 35 years old.
Young.
We were the youngest. I think we were, so a friend of mine, Mary, was appointed with me. We're about the same age, and we were the youngest elected officials in the region by quite some time. So
wow.
Obviously that's shifted since then. We've had more and more folks that are kind of, in our age range, or just different generations, quite honestly, whether it's, before me or older, it's more diverse today. And I think that, Mary and I putting our names in the hat and stepping out on a limb like that, certainly had an impact on some folks in our community that are now in office, or at least, made that commitment. And so I was reelected and immediately voted vice president of the board by my colleagues on the board, and then 2 years later voted in as the president, which is right about when COVID hit. So, so when I share that experience, right, I don't know that there's an experience that will ever be duplicated. We don't ever want another, pandemic. However, living in the political arena that was COVID and leading a school district, it was hard. It was interesting. It's an experience I'll never ever want to change. I learned that I will never make everybody happy. So what I learned about myself and how I was able to step forward and lead was pretty significant in that process, because at the end of the day, and you're in a seat like that, the priority is education, is the students and the kids. And I think for a lot of that period of time, it became way too political. And my goal and our goal was to keep students in the classroom at all costs. I mean, we knew that was where the best education happened. And regardless of the decision, you were gonna piss off half over here or the half over here.
You're gonna piss off
and then tomorrow
somebody.
I make another decision, and that's gonna flip. And so it's exciting and it's fun. It's just, for me, this stuff doesn't bother me, right? I mean, I've been called more names, during that period of time than I could probably sit here for, a whole day and list off.
Are you serious? So, just a D11 president, you getting that kind of vitriol?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Dude.
And it was intense,
Wow.
And oftentimes diffusing, tense situations in the boardroom, and rightfully so. Parents care about their kids. And, and it's my job and our job as a board to listen to that, but it's our job to also make the best decisions, for our students, and give a good education to every student, right? And that's what public education's about. And it was a fun opportunity for me to give back to the district I graduated from, and certainly given the fact that Mitchell High School was so significant in my life and providing the relationships that I have that kept me here.
Yeah.
And so to be able to serve my district and to do that was an honor and a privilege. And regardless of COVID, I'll never want to change that. So.
Wow. That's, I don't know if I'll ever want to do something like that.
You learn a lot about your city.
Yes, you do.
In those seats. Sometimes you're like, I wish I didn't know as much as I do. But, but you have it. So, yeah.
So you finished that, and as we come to a close, I want to finish on the good end.
Yeah.
What gave you the idea, but with hearing your life, I'm not shocked, that, you know what, I'm going to go to Argentina and buy a vineyard.
Yeah. Again, you go about life, eyes wide open. And I've always seen, people that I meet, relationships and bonds that I build as something that's very powerful in who we are. It's something I hold very close and always have, and have a unique ability to form bonds really quickly. And so I was privileged to be selected for a fellowship at Harvard University.
Oh.
And I'd just gone through the governor's fellowship here in Colorado, and on the end of that was selected by the Gates Family Foundation for the Harvard Kennedy School Program of State and Local Government. And so COVID hit, and again, life in the universe happens in mysterious ways. I was supposed to go in 2020. They canceled that program that year. 2021, I had the option to do it virtually. I declined, which meant I went in 2022.
Okay.
Those decisions led to your question, because in that program I met a gentleman by the name of Alex. And Alex and I hit it off really quick and spent quite a bit of time throughout that month together at Harvard. And as the program was coming to end, I had only booked a one-way flight because I wanted to be flexible. And he's like, well, I'm going to Chicago. I'll go by myself. Well, why don't I just go with you?
Yeah, why not?
So I pop into Chicago with him. We have a weekend together. We start talking business. And in that process, he's like, we need an importer for our wines in the U.S. because he owned this vineyard in Mendoza. It's a family vineyard that's been around 200 years. And we're the same age, so he bought it from his family about 20 years ago. And so I was like, well, being an importer would be pretty cool. And so I started the process of getting my permits and all of the things. And as soon as I finished that and now have my importer's permit and license, we decided to go down and visit Argentina, my wife and I. And we absolutely fell in love. I mean, we've been to a number of countries, and her and I were blessed to do quite a bit of travel before we just had the twins 4 months ago. But when we got back from that trip, I'd called Alex, and I was like, we might want to buy a house down there. We've been looking to buy a place internationally, and Argentina just connected with us really well. And we started talking. He's like, well, what about become a partner in the winery? And we have this property that we'll develop, and we'll build villas on, and you'll have a villa whenever you're in Argentina. So, well, that sounds like a much better plan.
Right.
And so we decided, well, let's do it. And my wife and I we jumped right in. We decided we're going to do this. And as of last year, I think we finished the process. We flew down to Argentina last October to finish off the transaction, get all of our bank accounts and our official credentials in Argentina, and officially now are the owners of Finca Los Masa Winery.
Wow.
Right now we export to China, Spain, and some of the EU, as well as Mexico, all over Argentina, and we're really close to landing in the U.S. We're starting right here in Colorado Springs for distribution. So that's really exciting. And to your point, I mean, I was 19 years old. I had only known rural country. Didn't expect college. certainly didn't expect to be blessed by this amazing family, this beautiful wife, and now have the opportunity to be a business owner in a foreign country. And by the way, the wine industry is an amazing industry to be a part of. I can't tell you a thing about growing grapes, but you know, the business side of it,
Yeah.
I can get that. But you know,
Wow.
it's an industry that just pulls you right in and
Yeah.
wraps its arms around you and
It will let you go.
Yeah, and
Wow.
it's a lot of fun. So,
So that is so cool. Just like you don't really. I guess the main thing I'm hearing from your story is sometimes you don't have to force things. Just be good to people, have good relationships, and doors just open.
yeah, no, absolutely. It's you know, all of those things, you know, professionally, personally, you know, they put me in the position I am now with InBank as their community bank president, and that decision was intentional as well, because you know, I think there was some unfinished business from a community impact standpoint that this industry, you know, gives me the platform to accomplish, and I'm excited to have that opportunity not only to serve Colorado Springs now, but numerous communities throughout the state, and to share that with my family and
Totally.
and to build a bank. And so,
Yeah, that is so cool.
Yeah.
So before I let you go here, I just want to ask, in your 20-year career, what would you say then, looking back, because it seems like you reflect a lot. You got a young person, whether they're going banking or just in whatever, they're just trying to make it into the world. What's the one thing that you'll tell them, this is the one thing you have to make sure you abide by?
Obviously, I think understanding who you are and what your core values and principles are very key. I think that reflects in the relationships you have. I think it reflects in how you do business. But I think by and large, it is, you know, just appreciate the opportunity that you have each day, and the circumstances, better or worse, are oftentimes temporary. And your ability to make the best of those circumstances and see the opportunity is quite significant in what that next step looks like for you, right? Or what that next opportunity looks like. And for me, the absolute core and thing that I'll hold on to the most are the relationships that you establish through this work.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you're investing in other people and you have someone like-minded next to you doing the same thing, you know, it's hard to not form a bond and to innately want to now invest in them and support their success. And for me, my success is measured by the success of the people around me entirely. You know, what can I do to support you in your work, because your work matters and it's going to have an impact on someone's life. And if I can do that and do that and do that, you know, it tends to have a ripple effect. And for me, the success comes when I see somebody similar to, you know, my background, how I grew up, and seeing them look at themselves as a professional for the first time, maybe. You know, there's a difference between a job and a career, and you know, the mindset is different in those two things too. And the more that I can help folks see an opportunity or position as a career and what that future could be, you know, the better I am, the happier I am. But again, that's where that success comes from, is duplicating that impact. And it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think that answered the question.
No, that's perfect. That is perfect.
So,
thank you, dude.
Emmanuel, thank you very much.
Thank you for coming and just, I mean, we're definitely honored because this is awesome. Thank you.
No, you're very welcome. Thank you. This is a lot of fun, and didn't know what to expect, but you know, I was like, you know what, that's okay. I didn't know what to expect at a whole lot of points, you know,
I know, right?
and a lot of good things come out of that. And so,
to your words, you figured it out.
Figured it out. And so,
Awesome. Thank you, man. Thank you, all of you, for watching. Remember, we all have a story. What's your story? Goodbye.